Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Phantom Thread. This was written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And I'm not going to sit here and bore you with yet another kind of redundant intro for Paul Thomas Anderson just because I've talked about him a lot, but I will say that this is his second collaboration with Daniel Day-Lewis, actor Daniel Day-Lewis, after 10 years. The first one was in 2007, that was There Will Be Blood. But apparently he was a lot more hands-on in terms of the actual collaborative aspects with PTA in terms of the actual writing of the project. This film is not about an oil tycoon in the early 1900s like There Will Be Blood is, but you can definitely draw some parallels between that character and this character, the Woodcock character that he's playing, just because they both are characters that really need a lot of control in their life, and because of that control and being kind of dominant and in power all of the time, it slowly isolates them. Daniel Day-Lewis plays Reynolds Woodcock, who is a dressmaker in the 1950s. He dresses only the finest clientele, royalty and all that. He's revered in his vocation, and he's the kind of guy who just immerses himself in his work because he likes to be, as I said, in control of every little thing, every seam, every button is so intricate. But then he meets a waitress named Alma who is waiting on him one morning for breakfast, and she isn't particularly elegant or sophisticated, but she has an appeal to him. And this movie is really just mainly about their love story and how she quickly becomes his muse creatively. But this is a very complex sort of love story where there are constantly shifts in terms of the power dynamic between the two of them. This is not a movie that is easily summed up. It's not a movie to easily categorize. And I don't know, I always feel kind of bad about reviewing Paul Thomas Anderson movies only after one viewing, just because I feel like it's really unfair. Like, this is the kind of movie that I feel like I need to see at least a couple more times before I really have a fully fleshed out idea of how I feel about it, but I'm gonna do my best here. It's very unexpected. You always think that it's gonna go one way, and it constantly surprises you by doing something very different. And tonally, it does a lot of things that are very interesting to make everything seem more complex, where you see a lot of the irony in things. It's a film that's more subtle and intimate than maybe some previous PTA works, and yet it has that coldness. There's a rigid quality to it. And of course, because it is a PTA film, the camera is always moving. He loves to do that. And yet the movie still, at the same time, it feels very claustrophobic because a lot of it is taking place in this house. In many ways, this film is a comedy of manners. I think there's a lot of humor in it, and I hope that audiences really catch on to that. I think this is a movie that is about behavior that is kind of simmering underneath this very porcelain, very delicate facade that you see in this fashion world. And I kind of like that. There's a lot of ambiguity. A lot of the characters' backstories and the situations are often inferred. It's not a wildly passionate or melodramatic film because of the social setting. I think that has a huge part to play, and that, to me, is part of what shapes the ideology of the film. There's just this idea of coldness, this idea of distance and wanting to be needed in a relationship. Anyone who is in a relationship wants to feel needed, wants to be able to nurture that other person. And it's kind of constantly asking the question, can people, when they get to a certain point in their lives, can they change? Or maybe a better question might be, if I'm looking at it from the actual character's mindset, should that person have to change for someone else? Phantom Thread never hits the obvious emotional cues, and it doesn't fit a mold. It's very reminiscent of Kubrick, and I know that's something I've said a lot about Paul Thomas Anderson, and it has been said about him before. That's maybe one of his greatest influences, I think, especially in the 21st century era Paul Thomas Anderson films. All of his films deal with subject matters and places and characters that all seem very different from one another. And yet, even though they all take place in multiple periods throughout time, there's a timeless quality about it. They don't feel like period pieces, and they have a very individual feel to them. Like, it all feels like Paul Thomas Anderson is his own genre in the same way that Kubrick often felt like he was his own genre. Part of what makes the movie compelling is just the subtlety of everything, the little nuances that the actors pick up on. The acting in this film is absolutely spectacular. Daniel Day-Lewis, to me, I've said this a lot, he's not somebody that I think of as an actor. He's somebody that he inhabits the person that he's playing as though he's always been that person. And, in this film, it's more subtle. It's not like he's playing Daniel Plainview or somebody like that who is very, very different from who he is in real life. Like, here, he doesn't stray too far from the way that Daniel Day-Lewis normally looks, and his accent is very similar to his normal speaking voice. But yet it feels so specific to this film. He holds his face a little bit differently, his mouth differently, the way he walks, the way he speaks. It feels very authentic. And he's such an interesting character because he's a man who is, for whatever reason, very rooted in his own ways. He is so unwavering. And when he's questioned about it, he gets so defensive like a child. He's a very difficult character, a very cryptic character. And we're always trying to understand him in the same way that Alma is constantly trying to understand him. And Vicky Krieps, I'm not sure how to say her name, but she is wonderful in this film and absolutely holds her own against Daniel Day-Lewis. She's slightly shy and kind of quiet, but there's a real strength to her. She has confidence. She feels both lifted and inspired by him, but at the same time caged by him. And so in the same way that he's looking for control, she's also looking for her own control and her own identity. And throughout the film, there's a note of strangeness. And I think you can say that for the majority of PTA films. Things just always feel slightly off. He just has a very unsettling sense of humor. And in this film, I think a lot of the humor comes from not only, as I said, the behavior and everything, but also the idea of food. This movie centers around food a lot. There are a lot of scenes at breakfast, and they kind of tell a story. In a way, they almost mark passages of time throughout the relationship. I mean, even when she first meets him, she's serving him breakfast. And what happens during the meals as the relationship matures makes you realize that this can be potentially a very toxic relationship for the both of them. Really, at the end of the day, there's just this young girl who just wants to please the man that she loves so much, and she will go to great lengths to become the one who he needs the most of anyone. And she does it in kind of disturbing ways. And that ties in with the food, because she's literally serving him at the beginning of the film because she wants to please him. She wants to nurture him. There's that feeling of control. And he seems to have quite a ravenous appetite, where the childlike kind of fundamental human instincts and needs come into play. Also, what contributes to that strangeness and that unlikely humor is the score. The score to this is, oh my God, impeccably amazing. It is by Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, and he has yet again created a classic. I've said this before, that There Will Be Blood, that's one of my favorite scores of the past, 15 years, I would say. And with this score, it's very different from that one in the sense that it has a very kind of classical feel, very elegant, but it's sentimental, but it's sentimentally cheeky. There's an irony in it. You have this beautiful, lush piano melody playing on top, but yet there are also a lot of strings as well, and that create kind of a frenzied, slightly syncopated quality that does remind me a bit of There Will Be Blood, that has that just something that's kind of slightly off kilter. There are so many things that I want to talk about when it comes to this movie, but as I said at the beginning, I need to see it again and really let it mull over again to be able to formulate a good thesis. But on an initial viewing, I have to say I was very taken with it. I found it to be very interesting. I think I was taken by it because it's a very uncommon portrait of a relationship, because there are a lot of inconsistencies in a long-term relationship, and they pick up on all of that. I think that this movie likes to show that love can be enhanced in certain situations, and then it can fade during others. How for the Reynolds character, she can inspire him and make everything feel fresh, yet at the same time she can completely disrupt the balance of his normal life. I love the way that all of that was written. I loved the way that the actors portrayed it, as I said before, because they pick up on all of those multiple layers, a lot of that ambiguity as well, and they embody them fully. It's elegant and it's sophisticated, it's alluring, and it's something that, when I get to see it again, I'll then be able to kind of see Paul Thomas Anderson's progression as an artist more and be able to see how it fits in his filmography overall. And that's my review. Thank you all for listening. All my social media information is below. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.